Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, by the time most of our listeners get this episode, it will be Friday morning, usually around 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning Central. By then, will the Chargers have a new coach?
Yes. Well, yeah, interim coach, yeah.
Yeah. My question more involves, like, the time difference between Central and, like, Pacific at this point. Because that's pretty early to make a coaching change on the West Coast.
Yeah, okay, so my feeling is he's going to get fired tonight and they'll make the announcement in the morning. Obviously, like you mentioned, the morning for them is a little bit different, but I imagine before the announcement, it'll get filtered through your Schefters and your Breeders and your Rappaports and your Peliceros, and we'll end up hearing about it several hours before the Chargers social media person wakes up from his bender and tweets about it.
Before he, he's staying up all night watching anime tonight, so...
I was thinking about this. I'm kind of excited for next year's schedule release just to see what they say about the Raiders.
Just to see, like, the points.
Yeah, like, are they going to acknowledge it? They must.
I mean, the points going up in a way of, like, you putting the quarter in the machine and watching it spin.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's perfect.
It was funny. I was working tonight, so I didn't get a chance to watch the first half of the game. Actually, most of the first, all of the first half and into the third quarter, I was announcing at the college, and I was told what the score was and had a good laugh. And then on the drive home, I listened to the Chargers broadcast, the Chargers radio broadcast, which is apparently a thing still, and I had the option of listening to the Raiders one or the Chargers. I chose correctly. I went with the Chargers. There's nothing worse than listening to a radio guy really, really, really happy. No. We're done. So instead, and full of themselves. So instead, I listened to the Chargers, who were very resigned with what was going on, and just hoping for a first down on a third down. And when Easton Stick provided two of those in a row, they're like, this is fantastic. And then the big guy touchdown happened, and they were just... It was absolutely a Ron Burgundy moment of, I'm not even mad, this is amazing. And then the interception happened immediately after that, the pick six. It was just phenomenal. They just spent 5 minutes going, that might be one of the greatest interceptions I've ever seen. I think he caught it with his bicep. Like, how does he catch it with his bicep? It was just... begrudging, like, amazement as to what was going on. Truly remarkable. And the thing that absolutely sucks is the fact that I feel like I may have caused this with my article today that was posted on Wide Left, where I was pointing out Don's team specifically needed to lose in the tournament, and he is starting the Raiders defense today. So,
yeah,
this one might be my bad.
I do blame you. Yeah, no, that is your fault. Luckily, they did give up some meaningless scores at the end, so that did tamp down the point total, but it was still 49 points.
Yeah, not a great showing. Well,
but the highest potential player, the kicker, only got 9 points. So
yeah. So I'll take that as a small victory. Just saying. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have a game to preview. We'll be doing an interview that Arif conducted earlier today about involving the Bengals game, so we'll be doing that in just a few. And then we have a small mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month, or a little bit less for the year subscription. You get access to stuff like the bonus material, you get access to the Discord, all of that over at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go over to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of wonderful Christmas items that exist over on the website, including the holiday socks, the wreath socks that are just fantastic. There's the shower curtain is still available. I believe there's the shower the thing for the floor. Yeah, you can get
floor mat. God,
yeah,
that's
the floor mat's
worse.
still there.
That's worse.
The throw pillow, all of that is available over at norsecode.threadless.com. Help make a reef uncomfortable today, and that's my new sign off for that. I like that. Let's go to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today. He spoke with John Goodberry. We've had him on the show before. He's fantastic. He has a YouTube show called Bengals on the Brain, and this is an interview that Arif conducted earlier today. And we'll be back on the other side with the mailbag.
All right, I'm here with Joe Goodberry, host of a YouTube show called Bengals on the Brain, which should be familiar if you've seen him on Twitter. He's got his avatar is just a skull with the brain that just has the Bengals stripes all over it, which I think pretty much describes his online presence. Man, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, man. I remember when we met at the Senior Bowl, and I didn't know what you looked like, and you knew what I look like, and so you're like waving to me, and I'm like, "Hey, who is that?"
Yeah, we're sitting. We've got the same flight to Mobile, I think, and
yeah.
I see you standing there. You're on your phone, and I just look up. I'm like, "Oh, that's Arif." I'm gonna stare at him creepily just a little bit longer. I was like, and then I'll go say hi to him after I freak him out.
So one thing that I think a lot of people on Twitter have noted about you, hopefully you know about this. I don't want to be like breaking news to you about how people perceive you,
Okay.
but is that the Bengals being successful broke your brain? That's the rumor going around.
It was already broken.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But yeah, I remember before, I think it was the 2019 season, you because the Vikings were playing the Bengals week 1. Before that season, you had predicted that the Bengals would make a pretty deep playoff run, and they had just come off of like an awful season, right?
So that's 2021, yeah.
Okay, man, I'm way off. Yeah, because Burrow hadn't even and we all dunked on you. We were all like, this dude, oh my god. Come on, man. The Bengals were like 4-13 or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
There's no way they're going to make the playoffs, man. I like Burrow, but have you seen this team?
And I even said the Super Bowl window starts now. People lost their mind.
Yeah.
And they went to Super Bowl that year, if you don't remember. And you did all right for yourself. Being a fan, right? That was me being the analyst. That was me being a draft evaluator, to be honest with you. It was how high I thought of Joe Burrow in the last few draft classes that the Bengals had. I'm like, I think a lot of these guys are going to hit. And if Burrow's good this year, this team's going to be good. And people just couldn't fathom that a year 2 quarterback makes that big of a difference. And I'm like, everything we've looked at for years says it does.
Well, here you are, man. Dude, I didn't believe you. Here we are.
No one did.
All right. Well, unfortunately, the centerpiece of that argument, Joe Burrow, is not going to be available. But Jake Browning, former Viking Jake Browning, is going to be the starting quarterback. Jake Browning right now is second in the NFL in EPA per play, behind another well-regarded quarterback in Brock Purdy, universally beloved. Everyone agrees he's elite. Brock Purdy,
that's right.
Number 1 EPA per play. There's like a lot of skepticism, I think, about Browning. And yeah, I think a lot of it is fair. Vikings fans are somewhat familiar with him. They've seen him in the preseason. They've seen him just kind of generally. And he is he's insanely well liked in the locker rooms from my experience. But he's fairly well liked just kind of generally. But at the same time, I've seen undrafted quarterbacks like go off before and then just kind of chill. This guy is on, I think this is just his second team, right? I don't think that he's bounced around a ton.
Correct.
But, one team gave up on him. Sometimes that happens. I remember Donald Penn became an elite tackle for the Buccaneers after the Vikings cut him as an undrafted free agent. That stuff happens. But what is real about this dude, and what's fake, I guess, is the best way to put the alternate.
So he started 3 games now, and the first game was against Pittsburgh Steelers, and they put up 10 points, and he did not look good at all, to be honest with you. After that game, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a rough second half of this year.
Pittsburgh's not even a good team.
I know. It was 16-10. I mean, it was a really ugly game to watch. And I thought, all right, we're moving to evaluation mode, right? Let's start looking at these first and second year players that need playing time, yada, yada. You know how it goes. And they changed the offense. So that game, it's like they took Browning and said, we're going to drop you into Joe Burrow's offense. And to Browning's credit, to be fair, he said, hey, don't pull anything back. Let me prove I can run this offense.
Oh, dude, he said the exact same thing with the Vikings.
I'm sure. He's confident, and I get it. So they drop him in the Burrow offense, and it's like, yeah, this cannot work. They can't do it. They can't complete a pass on third down because the Steelers are just toying with him after the snap. And so they go in the next week, and that's the Jaguars Monday Night Football game, and everything's different. I'm talking not just quick passes because that's a staple of the Joe Burrow offense, but play action, screens, RPOs, everything to get it out of his hands, everything to help the offensive line, everything to cut the field in half if you can off play action and boots and naked boots, getting him out of the pocket and rolling away. And it's worked. And they've increased all of it. Like they've doubled their screen amount. And they were a terrible screen team for the last 3 years under Burrow. So maybe like Browning just has better touch and timing with it and better understanding of how to run the screen game. But
he did throw a ton of screens in college.
Right. You remember that too. You probably talked a lot about Browning. I've been saying this to Bengals fans. I'm like, we watched John Ross, right? We watched John Ross at Washington. That was the quarterback that was throwing all those bad passes. It was him. It was Jake Browning. And everyone's like, you're so hard on Browning. I'm like, dude,
hey, whoa, relax, dude.
Yeah. And then the preseason was never good, ever. And so for him to get this type of production, it's on one hand, like awesome to see, fun, good for him. But the evaluation side of it is it's not going to be sustainable for long. I don't know how you can scheme stuff forever, but like bring up Brock Purdy and the Shanahan offense. I mean, they have found a way, but Zach Taylor's offense has never been considered that in any way. So for them to get so many manufactured easy touches to their weapons in the last 2 weeks is blowing our minds.
That's really fascinating. So we had a conversation about this on Minnesota Football Party. It's part of the Locked On Network, another podcast I'm on. And Luke brought up that, hey, you mentioned like all those rollouts and cutting the field in half. Luke brought up in his conversations with Bengals people that was something that had characterized Browning's play. And so during the show, I looked up, his play action percentages, stuff like that. And over the 3 weeks of play, he's at 28% or 25%, pretty close to Burrow. But over the last 2 weeks, like you mentioned with the offense change, it's up to 33%, which is relatively high in the modern NFL. Very high, actually. Mm-hmm. And then his PFF grade in when he's in play action is like 90 plus. And then when he's out of play action is about 60 plus, which that includes a lot of that includes the Pittsburgh game. If you exclude it, it goes up to 75 plus. But the point is that it very much seems like a lot of his positive production has come on play action. And when he's not in play action, which, if you believe the way that PFF breaks down the data and the analysis and stuff like that, that tends to map out in terms of predictiveness a little bit more. But when he's not in play action, when he's in a standard drop back, say it's like third and long or something like that, he kind of struggles is the wrong word. If you're like 60 plus and you're a backup quarterback, you're actually doing really well for yourself. But, relatively speaking, it's significantly less effective. Does that kind of match what you've been seeing?
100%. And it is why I'm kind of curious about this game because of all the different things that Brian Flores does on defense. Like, can you turn your back to the defense too many times? Like, do you want him doing this play action? And then also game script is going to be a big thing. Like if you're down, can you run all that stuff? And they really haven't been. They've been neutral against the Jaguars the entire time. It was a shootout back and forth, but like within 7 the entire time they could run their offense. And then against the Colts, they were up by it got 14-14, but at one time they were up 14 and then they were up 20 to finish the game. They were able to run whatever they wanted to on offense. So I'm very curious to see will the running game be able to be a staple and will they be able to lean on it? Will the game script allow, and which allows more play action, or at least coaches feel that way. And then number 2, if you end up in 3rd and 5 plus, he is not seeing the field very well when they rotate coverages, or if they have creepers and stunts or creepers and simulated pressures up front. And I'm like looking at this Vikings defense. I'm like, oh no, complete opposite for that Colts defense. The Colts did nothing to disguise their defense at all. The Jags very similarly, very rarely switched coverages after the snap too. And I'm like, this is going to be completely different.
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting. Browning has had one of the lowest blitz rates in the NFL. Around 23 to 25%, depending on which kind of week set that you're looking at, whether it's just the last 2 or all 3. And so we don't have a ton of data about him when he's blitzed. Now, we have seen when he's blitzed, he tends to throw the ball a little bit, at least if you include the Pittsburgh game, a little bit deeper against the blitz than a lot of young quarterbacks do. A lot of young quarterbacks just throw it short. But just the last 2 games, it's actually one of the lowest depths of target. So I think the Pittsburgh game stands out. There was a lot of deep throws against the blitz in that game.
Yeah, he was just chucking it up when he wasn't sure.
Yeah, and we know how that worked out. So, we don't have a huge sample size of his dropbacks against the blitz. 17 in the last 2 weeks, 33 in the last 3, and it is, it's whatever in terms of depth of target. The turnover worthy play rate to the big time throw rate, it's like 3-3, which is not actually very good. But the production has been there, and a lot of it, I think, probably has to do with the effectiveness of the screens that you mentioned. You basically previewed the question I was about to ask about the way that the Brian Flores defense operates and the way that he kind of reacts to it. But then the next question is, how will Zach Taylor kind of adapt to that reality? Is it going to be a ton of screens? Because the Vikings are real good against screen passes, like really good.
Yeah, normally the thought is if a team's going to blitz you, you screen them, right? And you hopefully you beat it 1 or 2 times, and that's a chunk play, and that could be the difference in the game. We really haven't seen a blitz-heavy defense against a non-Burrow offense in a long time, and Burrow has been known for dicing up blitzes. So, I don't think that we've ever really worried about it, or maybe we took it for granted and never really studied, what is Taylor doing specifically? What is Brian Callahan as the coordinator doing specifically? Because it just seems like Burrow sees it, reads it correctly, gets the ball out to the right guy at the right time. He and Jamar Chase are psychically connected, and they could just figure it out after the snap if everything goes wrong. Now, when you don't have that, are you going to be able to control that? Are you going to be able to put more protection inside? And I would say so far, that has been probably where I would say the biggest difference has been in terms of their pass protection, is that Burrow likes to go 5 empty versus the blitz, or 5 wide empty versus the blitz, spread you out, and then he can identify relatively easy who's coming and who's going. With Browning, they're going with extra blockers. They're bringing tight ends in to block. They're bringing running backs in. They're keeping running backs in to block. Drew Sample, who's a tight end, who's a good blocker. Washington also with Jake Browning. They bring him in as the third down back and let him pass protect. He's been really good at it. So they're bringing more guys in and letting them figure it out rather than put it all on the quarterback. Let Ted Karras and the O-line call it out. Let the backs and Drew Sample figure it out and decipher it. And I think that's probably their answer, but they just haven't seen it so much that I don't know if the experience is there for me to feel confident that they'll be able to pick it up consistently.
All right. Well, a big part of that's going to be that receiving group. You mentioned Jamar Chase having a great connection with Joe Burrow. There's been some conversation about who's the better receiver between Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and I do want to get your opinion on that. But before we engage in a meaningless debate like that, let's talk a little bit about his usage pattern over the last 3 weeks. 149 yards and 12 targets against Jacksonville. That game did go to overtime, but still, it's a pretty heavy target rate. And then 4 targets for 29 yards against Indy. 6 targets for 81 yards against Pittsburgh. This seems kind of random. What do I make of his usage in a Jake Browning offense?
So the last week, he actually tweaked his ankle on the first target. So I wonder if that had an effect. He was limited in practice this week because of that ankle. I wonder if he got to the sideline and just, told him, hey, this is what's going on. And the screen game and run game was working, so they didn't force feed it to him. The Jags game is different from the 3 because if you remember the first 2 or 3 drives, it was a bunch of bubble screens and wide receiver screens and alert screens, RPO screens. The Bengals have screens built into almost every run play when it was Joe Burrow. And a lot of that is carried over with Jake Browning. So if they see you've got off coverage, or if they see that you don't have the numbers on that side, or even if you bring an extra guy to defend the run in the box, they'll just flip it out to Jamar Chase and say, hey, do something crazy and make it happen. And a lot of times he will. So they're comfortable just force feeding him 0 average depth of target throws and letting him maybe get 6 yards out of it. Last week, they didn't do it as much. And it really just comes up to the defense and how they're playing and how they want to play. I think the way the Vikings make things murky, if they're bringing and crowding guys at the line, you may say, hey, I'm going to flip this out and get them away from these guys and let them make a play and see if I can, get away from all the traffic. Because it's that's not a play that you're really worried about someone intercepting it or really getting their hands on the ball. It's a low percentage, low risk, I should say, a play, high percentage throw. You should be able to get chunk yardage off that if you can make a guy miss, which Jamar Chase does all the time. So I would say so far, like that's the way they're manufacturing touches for him. Other than that, he's still the guy they're going to move in motion a lot. The guy they're going to do orbit motions, jet motions. They may even give him the ball once in a while. One from they did last week on a jet play, and they'll use T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd to spell him. Basically, if you're going to roll too much coverage towards Jamar Chase, they're more than happy to throw to T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So it's really dependent on what the defense wants to do.
All right, so who's better, Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson?
Honestly, I think Justin Jefferson is better, and it's because I think he's a little bit better of a route runner, and he always was in college. But when Jefferson got to the NFL, the thing that really surprised me was his route running at all three levels and being able to get deep. Remember that was the conversation. Oh, he's just a slot guy. We're not sure how fast he actually is. Yada yada.
Can he get off of press?
Yes.
That kind of yeah.
That's the same thing about Jamar Chase. It must have just been the LSU offense. Can he get off press? Is he that fast? Right? Remember they thought Jamar Chase was like some fast Anquan Bolden. He's like so much more than that, right? So both of these guys somehow blew the expectations off. But Jefferson to me is a better route runner, and to me, if I was defending the two, the biggest difference between the two is that Jefferson, his long stride is weird. It like breaks your brain and eyes the way he runs routes. That's like he shouldn't be able to break here. He shouldn't be able to cut here. He shouldn't be able to get out of this break as fast as he does. And he does. He's very weird to watch his gait and how he runs. And with Jamar Chase, he is surprisingly strong as hell. Like it's insane how strong he is because he's not the biggest dude. He's 6 foot and 205, and then you see his calves and they're completely rock solid. And guys try to take him down, especially up high, and he just throws them off consistently. I would say this year he's been tackled more than normal, but the last 2 years, I bet he was tackled. He had, 200 catches basically the last 2 years. I bet he was tackled 50 times total. Tackled by the first guy, maybe 15 times total. I bet someone's got numbers on that, but that was my perception watching. Like they never get this guy down. It is tough to tackle Jamar Chase when he's healthy and feeling it.
All right, fair enough. You've got, regularly the Bengals appear at the top of like best receiving core lists and stuff like that. T. Higgins, my understanding is that they're probably not going to be able to extend him. Don't know what the deal with that is, but for now he's on the Bengals and he
guaranteed money, agent stuff. They don't get along.
Yeah, fair enough. But T. Higgins is fairly good number 2. In fact, before Jamar Chase was drafted, a lot of people were like, yeah, this guy's like basically a number 1, which is like that's not super confident,
right?
but that was like kind of the conversation.
If you basically have a number 1, you probably need a receiver.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which I guess the Bengals made their choice. It was a good choice. And then you got Tyler Boyd, who I think for the first 4 years of his career is persistently featured on like the most underrated lists. Now, for me, I think his production is a little bit disappointing. I still like him as a player, but the production just hasn't been there for me to feel as willing to defend him, if that makes sense. You've got like it's not the Princeton kid, is it? Yeah, it is a Princeton kid. Andre Yosivas, because there's a Cleveland Browns Princeton kid from a couple years ago. He's a tight end though, and he's supposed to be like a height, weight, speed guy. You've got Charlie Jones, who's really killing it as a punt returner. My God. And then Trenton Irwin, who just keeps on showing up and just grabbing yards out of nowhere. So tell me a little bit about tell me a little bit about this group overall, what you like, what you don't like, and kind of how the Bengals choose to deploy a group as talented as this.
Yeah, so Chase is the number 1. We've talked a lot about him. He can do everything, run routes from every position, and they'll move him all around, all depths of the field. They'll run him and try and target him throughout the game. And hopefully I think they go in every game thinking like 10 to 15 targets is what we're trying for. So they'll feed him. Tyler Boyd is the slot guy through and through. Like you said, the first few years when the Bengals offense was struggling to find another receiver, that's when they drafted John Ross and had Brandon LaFell, and they were really slow outside of Ross and Auden Tate also. So they got a bunch of guys running 4.6s out there other than Ross.
Tate.
But Boyd was really good as their number 1, but the offense sucked. So like that's a lesson for all fans that like if you're like, hey, this guy's a number 1, well, how's the offense and how's the passing offense? Not good. Well, then you probably need more explosion at that position. You probably need someone better. And the Bengals agreed. That's when they drafted T. Higgins in second round, 33rd overall. Next year they draft Jamar Chase, and quickly they feed those guys more than Tyler Boyd because let's face it, Boyd is a good possession slot guy. He makes mistakes for being a veteran. You'll see him drop passes, run wrong routes sometimes. And it's like, man, I can't believe his blocking lately has been really poor. He's a free agent at the end of the year. And I wonder if Charlie Jones will start eating into some of those snaps if the Bengals really find themselves on the back end of the playoff hunt, which they already are. But, a surprise loss here could really do it. And then T. Higgins, also a free agent at the end of the year. You alluded to that. He's the possession, big jump ball receiver, probably someone I compared him to someone you guys would know in the division, Kenny Galladay from back in the a few years ago before he fell off the map when he went to the Giants. Very similar to that, where he's
baby Tron.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's surprisingly agile for a guy that size. Like he'll sometimes cut, and especially on in breakers where you go, whoa, are you sure you're 6'4"? Yeah, that's not right. We don't see that all the time. And it even surprises me all these years later. I'm like, yeah, man, T. Higgins sometimes he just runs a route and you just don't see it from guys that big. And then they use Andre Yoshivach as the backup outside guy to T. Higgins. They'll bring him in. He's got really good vertical speed, but they haven't gotten a vertical ball to him yet this year. And you see it on tape, like he's open. And then I was like, man, he's open on this play. What's going on? I'm talking on Twitter as I say it. And I get a message from someone that would know. And they're like, yeah, he ran the wrong release and it spooked Burrow. And I'm like, okay. Well, I think these are things from Princeton 6th round receivers that I guess we'll have to get ironed out. And then Charlie Jones, like you said, from Purdue, caught 1 million passes last year, highly productive for them. They drafted him in the 4th round. He's projected to be the slot guy next year, but he just has not played a lot on offense yet. And he was hurt for a little bit, so they're slowly bringing him back. I expect he'll get more and more snaps. Right now, they're kind of using him like a speed slot, and the few snaps he does get, jet motion stuff, and letting him try and carry routes and run defenders out of the picture. So they're really not using him to get the ball in his hands. And as you mentioned, Trent Irwin, just faster than he looks. And that's not a race thing. He really is a little bit faster than he looks. He looks like he's running slow. And it's like, I'm like, how is he getting open still? Like he's not, his feet aren't moving fast. He doesn't look agile. He looks strong. He's got a receding hairline. And it's like, why are you fast? And somehow he gets open. So we like Trent Irwin, but we realize that we'd really like these other young guys to get playing time over him, despite the coaches disagreeing there.
So he just keeps on producing on like random days. Mostly when I'm playing against him in fantasy, but he just shows up with yards.
Very hard to predict so far. It's like, what is this? This is an 8-catch Trent Irwin day. Okay, then.
Yeah, all right. I guess we'll buckle in. Supplementing that is a less than impressive tight end group that includes former Viking Irv Smith. I mean, Tanner Hudson's actually playing really well. That's unfair. But
for 15 snaps a game, Hudson's like, hey, this is good.
Hey, what's up? I'm still here. But yeah, tell me a little bit about this group. I'm not expecting an Irv Smith revenge game. I think that's pretty fair. But you already mentioned that Drew Sample very often plays as kind of a blocking tight end, which I think was kind of the way people perceived him coming out of college anyway. So he's kind of slotting in all right there. Yeah, tell me about this group just generally.
Yes, I'll start with Drew Sample because we absolutely hated him in Cincinnati for the last 4 years. Like, because they spent a 2nd round pick on a guy that had no business going in round 2. I actually had him projected in the Bengals in my final mock in the 6th round. So when they say Drew Sample in round 2, my God, you could feel everyone go, what is this? And they're like, he's a great blocker. He's a good athlete, all around athlete. He only dropped 1 pass in Washington. He'll be better than this. And it's like, he had no production at Washington, guys. He's not going to turn into a number 1 tight end. And he didn't. And you know what, though? That's okay. Because now he's on a 1-year vet minimum deal, and he's a hell of a blocker. And he's 6'6" and 260 pounds, and he'll block his butt off. And that's all they ask him to do, and that's great. And now he surprisingly gets a couple catches a game and makes something happen. And it's like, okay, now you're a role player. We can drop the label from the 2nd round, and we can just enjoy what you're good at. And that's kind of the best way to watch football anyway. And everyone else, they've been trying to figure it out. They thought Irv Smith Jr. would replace Hayden Hurst. Oh, we could plug anyone in. We've had CJ Uzomah go get a big contract from the Jets. Then we had Hayden Hurst go get a big contract from the Panthers. We'll take Irv Smith Jr. He'll catch 45 balls, and he'll go get a big contract somewhere else. And Irv had just not fit at all. Last week, he got the least amount of snaps of the 4 tight ends. The other guy I haven't mentioned, or the other 2 I haven't mentioned, are Mitchell Wilcox, who is more of a special teamer, H-back blocker type. They'll put him at fullback once in a while. And then Tanner Hudson, who was a practice squad guy his entire career. I mean, he's 29 years old now. And what? I think so it's like, who's this guy? Where'd he come from? He was on the Giants for a couple of years. Then he was on the Bengals practice squad. And he's their best receiver. He's their best route runner. He's probably their most agile tight end. He's got the best hands and best ball skills, but they don't trust him to block. And even on film, there's sometimes they got to motion him in to come and block, and like he's just swimming. His eyes are all over the place. He doesn't end up touching anyone. And it's like, okay, that's why they don't use Tanner Hudson more than 15 snaps a game and give him 4 catches a game. I mean, honestly, per snap right now, he's killing it over the last 8 weeks. So he's good. It's just, I wonder how big his role ever can get if he's only playing, a few handful of plays per drive, or maybe a couple plays per drive. So I expect, again, that same rotation where the major guys are going to be Sample for blocking and Hudson for catching.
All right. So no Irv Smith revenge game. You heard it here. Probably not first, but you definitely heard it here. His running back group, obviously Joe Mixon has been playing pretty well. I don't think that he's playing at the level that, because a couple of years ago, people were talking about how great Joe Mixon is. Yeah. Now it just feels like he's good. But Chase Brown, he's shown. Yeah. So tell me about this group. Tell me, I feel like Chris Evans is from Michigan. He was like a pretty good athlete. Right. And then you got Travion Williams. I mean, this is like not a bad running back group. It just doesn't feel like it's, a top end type running back group.
Yeah. So Mixon now, he's 27, which he was 20 coming out. So it's been, it feels like he should be 30, but in the way he runs, sometimes I feel like he's 30, but I guess we'll get to that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of the talk in the offseason is he still special? And if he's not, can you pay a guy $10 to $12 million a year the next 2 years? They ended up coming to a restructure and make it more manageable. And he came back as the lead back. They really didn't have a great plan. They tried to re-sign Samaje Perine. They offered him exactly what the Broncos offered him. And Perine said, listen, I know I'm going to get touches and snaps here in Denver. I'm not really sure what you guys are doing with Joe Mixon. You say you're going to draft a back also. I'm just going to go take this offer in Denver and have a clear-cut role. So they lost Samaje Perine, and they go into the draft like, yes, we're going to draft our number 2 back. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And then finally in the 5th round, they get Chase Brown, who they thought was a 3rd-round kind of guy. So they're excited about Chase Brown. Hey, this is the best-case scenario. We ended up waiting and ended up getting a guy we really coveted anyway. So we were like, yes, he's going to walk in as the number 2. Instead, Mixon was carrying or touching the ball in the backfield. He was at like 92% up until last week of the total touches in the backfield, which was right with Josh Jacobs. So it was really only the Bengals and the Raiders, like just only using one back only. And the first carry of the season actually went to Chris Evans. So like if you had that on your bingo card, you won a lot of money. But we haven't seen Chris Evans since, so he kind of been relegated back to inactive list as for whatever reason. That seems to happen every time. He's made a lot of splash plays, but they do not trust him whatsoever. Travion Williams, bit of a plotter, not really big guy. They will bring him in for pass protection once in a while. He'll get his handful of snaps a game, play his role, not really touch the ball unless something weird happens. But it's really been Chase Brown over the last 2 weeks. The Jags game, he has the longest run of the year, 31 yards, I believe it was. And then he catches a screen to get the first touchdown versus the Colts, 54 yards. And he had 100 yards total, receiving and rushing. And I'm talking like the Bengals rookies to get over 100 yards are guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Giovanni Bernard, Jeremy Hill, Joe Mixon, and now Chase Brown over the last 10 years. I'm like, all those guys ended up being good players for the Bengals for a long time. Jeremy Hill only had 4 years, but still was a good player during those 4 years. It's like, wow, do they have something here with Chase Brown? He looks electric. He looks fast. He looks decisive. His feet are super quick. He's the exact opposite of Joe Mixon right now. And Mixon's fine. He is still super strong. He'll grind you down. He'll touch it 30 times in a game and looks like he's as fresh as ever on that 30th touch. He just doesn't have the same burst and agility that he had coming out. And he's mentally still thinks he has it. So a lot of times he'll test that edge. And it's like, yeah, you can't get there anymore. It's kind of weird to watch at this point. But he still has compiled a very nice season. I think he's 6th or tied for 5th most touches in the NFL amongst running backs, and he's 7th or 8th in total yardage. So he's still compiling a very nice season. But man, when Chase Brown gets out there, this offense is completely different.
That's good to know. I feel like a lot of Vikings fans are not as familiar with Chase Brown, so it's a pretty good capper. Well, before we get to the defense, obviously we got to talk about the offensive line. They are, I guess. I mean, Ted Karras, I think, is playing a little bit better than some people expected. I don't know what the perception is on Orlando Brown. I liked the move, but I have no idea kind of how that's played out. I know that there was like some question about what to do with Jonah Williams. That question was resolved. by just like not having Lyle Colley. He was injured and then he got an injury settlement. Is that right?
That's right.
So that kind of solved that problem, I guess. So you just play Jonah Williams at right tackle. Cordell Volson, NDSU guy, so I know he sucks. And Alex Kappa, right? That's the group. This feels like a whatever group to me.
They're middle of the pack on their best days. None of them are really special talents. I mean, Orlando Brown has made Pro Bowls, but because he's so huge and strong, he's not an athletically gifted guy, right? He gets by forcing guys into him, and wrestling with a bear is his game. Like, come on, if you can give him chip help and force guys to go into him, you're winning on that. And to me, Orlando Brown, he got like the 16th highest cap hit for left tackles in the league this year. And I'm like, that sounds great. That's perfect. It sounded like a big contract at the time, but it really wasn't bad at all. And I even on my show, I was like, guys, I know you're all excited because it is an upgrade. But let's watch the tape here. Like, he has limitations. He's, if the play gets extended too long, he's going to get beaten eventually. And I think we've seen exactly who he should have been and who he always has been. I just think some of his negatives have been magnified a little bit too much. Like, if you look at PFF grades, they're way down for the first time in his career. And it's not until the last couple of weeks where they start running the ball, where they're using play action and RPOs and using screens, and they're really not exposing the offense at all. I think their true pass sets the last 2 weeks is at like 28%, which is Miami Dolphins type offense. So it's really not exposing this offensive line at all. That's how you get their grades back up if you care about something like that. But it's how you get them, like, the perception of the regular fan is like, oh, the whole line's playing good. Finally, well, and Joe Burrow's not out there. Why couldn't they do this then? I'm like, they're still the same guys. It's still the same evaluation. Cordell Volson at left guard, big, huge guy. Volson and Brown, left guard, left tackle combo, probably only rivaled by the Eagles in terms of size. And he can move guys, them two together. They'll lean on them and run that way. Olsen's not the best side to side and little quick movements. You can get him with a quicker, faster pass rusher, more agile guy that can maybe go one way, get him the lunge, and then beat him back inside. But he's coming off like a good stretch of games. The first month of the year, I'm like, man, Volson's not taking the step in year two. Lately, I'm like, hey, he might be able to start in the NFL for the foreseeable future. Ted Karras is a fine player, and everyone loves him. And rightfully so. He's a great character and a great leader. He's an okay center. Alex Kappa, an okay right guard, solid player. Does have his bad games, does have his good games, but he's not an all-world player by any means. And then Jonah Williams is the highest drafted of all of them, former 10th overall pick, played left tackle, couldn't stay healthy, gave up a lot of sacks the last few years, but then they moved him to right tackle. And to be honest, evaluation-wise, he's the same exact player, but I don't feel like he's getting exposed as much at the left tackle spot. So I don't give too much credence to the blind side, right side versus left side. But when I see that movement, I kind of go, it's funny how he's not getting beat as often at right tackle. And he's still facing TJ Watt and a bunch of good players on that side. He just seems more comfortable and at home. And maybe the quarterback can see the rush a little bit more. So overall, they're a fine unit. I know the Vikings have dealt with a lot of offensive line issues in the last few years, but I think they're in a lot of ways pretty comparable, where you have days where it's like, hey, the whole line had a great day today. And then you go next week and you're like, man, they got absolutely demolished.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that. All right. So, that brings us to have a discussion about the defense, where on the opposite side, the Vikings have a number of injuries. So Brian O'Neill is not going to be in the game. Alexander Madison is not going to be in the game. Jalen, not that it matters, but Jalen Naylor is not going to be in the game. So that's kind of where the bulk of the Vikings injuries is when they play against the Cincinnati defense, which is probably going to matter more in terms of pass rush. Madison did not really move the needle as a runner. So really it's the Brian O'Neill news that, I think captures most of our attention. And this is like a pretty good pair of edge rushers. I haven't seen Myles Murphy play a lot. So to me, it's like Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson until I see a bit more of Myles Murphy. But this is a pretty good group of edge rushers, right?
And it's really all because of Trey Hendrickson. He is really, really, really good. Maybe the most underrated edge rusher in the entire NFL. I just had a big debate with this. Like, I was putting his numbers up versus TJ Watt over the last 4 years.
Oh, that's got to make some people mad.
Oh, it was because I'm using PFF numbers where half sacks count as full sacks, and they're losing their minds, and they don't understand. I'm like, it makes sense if you allow me to explain it, and they're like, I don't want to hear it. You're using fake numbers, and I'm like, okay, we'll keep moving. Then we're not compatible here. I'm just going to keep moving. But he is honestly really, really good, and he can win in a variety of ways. He was a former elite athlete coming out of FAU, and he just compiles a lot of pressure. We call him Blackout Trey because he will toe the line once in a while, and you can see it. He wears a visor, and just sometimes it's like, he's losing a little bit of that awareness that you need, and he's entering blackout mode, and he just bowls through somebody or just hits the quarterback late. He had this last week, and it's just like, yeah, he's about to take over the game soon, and he does, man. It's so often. It's like if Trey Hendrickson's not getting the pressure of the sack, nobody is. And he's got his work cut out for him this week versus Christian Darrisaw, who I absolutely loved coming out of that year. That was the year we were looking at Penei Sewell, and we're like, oh, man, this class is fantastic. You don't have to take a tackle in the first round. You can get a good offensive lineman in round 2. This class is amazing. And I had Darrisaw like number 8 or something in that class. But the Bengals didn't get a good offensive lineman that year. They drafted Jackson Carman in round 2. And completely messed that up. Hey, anyways, back to the defense. Sam Hubbard on the other side is a very, very smart, heady, good run defender, fantastic run defender, effort pass rusher. So if you give him time, if you put a backup out there, he's going to have one of his better days. And it seems like that's the situation now. On the interior, DJ Reader, one of the best nose tackles in the entire NFL, tremendous versus the run. Pesky versus as a pass rusher, will bowl a guy over if you give him an opportunity. BJ Hill is a solid overall player at the other defensive tackle spot, just good enough versus the run as a pass rusher, and just has a nose for making a play when they need one. So it's like, when you're kind of, man, where's BJ Hill been all day? And then all of a sudden he recovers the fumble or forces it or gets an interception last week. It's like, there he is. Great. There's BJ Hill. And he's having a good day. The backups, though, you mentioned Myles Murphy, first round pick out of Clemson. He's a good prospect that was going to need time. People were like, oh, maybe he's like Rashawn Gary in a couple years, right? But guys with little production that don't have a lot of moves coming out, they are scary. You know this as a draft guy too. And, you're always like, I don't know, man. I don't know if Danielle Hunter is going to pan out, and he does. And that's great. But, very similar type. The last few weeks for Myles Murphy, has been playing more and more and more. The flashes are starting to become consistent. And you're seeing the handwork starting to speed up, and the first move and the second move and the counter move starting to come in succession, like one after the next, and he finally wins. And it's like, okay, all right, I see the flashes. We got something here. And they'll go 5 deep at the position. Cam Sample out of Tulane from a few years ago, he can play. He's a good run defender. And then Joseph Osai, 3rd round pick out of Texas. They use him the least now out of all of them. He just got bypassed by Myles Murphy. But when Osai has played, he flashes a ton. And you'll see him out there and he'll play. And they really don't have anything to speak of at backup defensive tackle. When those guys get in, if you notice the Vikings got a decent chunk up the middle, especially in the running game, you're going to look at who's the backups or who's in for the defensive line right now. You're going to go, the backups are in 95 and 68.
Yeah, I mean, a lot has been said, I think, by people who like to brag about how much they know about football. And they're right in this instance about how good DJ Reader is. So you talk about nose tackles, it's like a signal, like, I know ball, that kind of thing. But it's not wrong, right? DJ Reader is really fantastic. But I just find the whole setup interesting because to me, BJ Hill is also like a nose tackle type, right?
Because he's big.
Yeah. And so, and he was from that like NC State group of linemen that was just crazy, right? That was nuts, that defensive line group. But yeah, the drop off seems to be pretty big, and maybe with Nick Mullins in at quarterback, I kind of doubt that this is what would happen. But that would be kind of an interesting check, right? As if the backup defensive tackles are in, we should probably check to a run. That would be interesting.
The middle. Yeah, they're really Zach Carter, 3rd round pick, 95. He cannot anchor for his life right now, and he's scared of double teams. He just crumbles. And then Josh Tupou is a 360 pounder, 68. Backup nose tackle, but he just can't move. So,
Yeah. All right. And then this group of linebackers, I think for a little bit, if I remember last year, it was Jermaine Pratt who said the thing on the way to the locker room at the end of the playoff game.
To Joseph Osai. Yeah. After Osai pushed Mahomes out of bounds.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. And he was talking about how it was like his last chance, and I felt like the understanding was he was probably going to leave, right? That he wasn't going to re-sign.
Correct.
But he did. And last year I had considered him to be one of the more underrated linebackers in the NFL. I don't know that he's playing up to that level, but what's interesting is that the year before that, I thought Logan Wilson was one of the more underrated linebackers in the NFL. And I don't know that he ever matched up to my expectations too, but these are two guys that I think are inherently fairly talented. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, Logan Wilson seems to be kind of the leader of that group.
Yep.
And there's kind of like a lot of things that they seem to do pretty well, but not necessarily, they're not going to take over a game. Tell me where I'm wrong, where I'm right.
They have taken over games is the weird part. And, it's an interesting thing because I don't know why they're having down years. Like if you just look at PFF grades from last year to this year and wonder why they had, just lightning in a bottle maybe last year and then both get extensions. And that's the thing too. We thought Pratt was gone because he wasn't playing in nickel last season. And it's like he wanted to prove he could. Lou Anarumo had issues with it. There was some communication issues. We thought there was maybe infighting going on. And then the linebacker market was completely cool. Remember, these guys were signing for like $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year. And it's like, what is going on? At this point, I think Pratt has a chance to come back. And he did. He got a good deal. And then they signed Logan Wilson, extended him in the summer. And so these are your two guys. And NC State, same class, actually, Jermaine Pratt, we were talking about BJ Hill. Former safety.
That's right. Yeah.
And Logan Wilson played safety in high school too. Like, so you've got guys that have some speed and some range, can cover. Logan Wilson has gotten his hands on the ball more than any linebacker since he's been in the league. So he will have those moments in those games. Jermaine Pratt, we call him playoff Pratt for the times he just makes a clutch play when the team needs it. And I've said this now about a few guys, and it really is true. Like, that's just not me saying, oh, I love this team, I'm a Bengals fan. They couldn't buy somebody to make a play during the Marvin Lewis era, right? It was like they get to the playoffs, they get to primetime games, and they crumble. This team is completely different. Yeah, famously, epically, hilariously, they'd crumble. And it's very different now. And these guys will make a play when you need one. Jermaine Pratt had the final interception on Derek Carr to get their first playoff win in 31 years. He ripped the ball out from Travis Kelce for Kelce's first fumble in like 3 years to get the Bengals back the ball to ice the game and win it against the Chiefs. And so he's had a lot of moments. He's very good in man coverage, not so good in zone coverage. Jermaine Pratt is a very, very good run defender, sideline to sideline speed, and a death grip for a tackler. Like if he gets his hands on you, it is over. He's a very good player who just sometimes I'm like, why'd you run over there? Why'd you do this? Why weren't you as fast as you should have been? Why didn't you take on that blocker with full effort? He just has those moments for whatever reason. They really don't rotate these guys too much. Like those two are out there, and they're out there for 98% of the plays a lot of the time. Logan Wilson is not as fast as Jermaine Pratt, maybe more fluid, more agile, much better in zone coverage, patrols the middle very well. They will bring him up and put sugar in the A gap, bring him right to the line, and then run him backwards all the way to cover the deep Tampa 2, and he gets there. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's why he gets his hands on the ball. He's tricking these quarterbacks very often. And he's also a sure tackler, not as strong as Jermaine Pratt, overall just physically and versus the run. But I think both of them we are very happy with. And you'll see once in a while they'll bring in Akeem Davis-Gaither of the same draft class as Logan Wilson from Appalachian State. He's a bit of a do-it-all athlete. They'll let him cover at times if they take Jermaine Pratt out.
It's really funny because I remember for so long the Bengals couldn't, draft a linebacker to save their lives. They were allergic to guys faster than 4.6, and then
4.8. The Raymond Luga, Vontaze Burfict, and James Harrison. Talk about headhunting linebackers at one point. And yes, they were playing Harrison as a linebacker. Like they did not understand that he was an edge rusher.
Well, yeah, because when Mike Zimmer first came over, they drafted Anthony Barr, and we were like, is he going to use Anthony Barr like they used James Harrison? And like kind of, but it worked out actually instead.
Yeah.
So
he ended up being a really good linebacker, right?
Yeah, it was very weird. But yeah, and then they grab like a super athlete in Akeem Davis-Gaither, a pretty decent athlete in Logan Wilson, both from like they're not like FBS schools. I was like floored, right?
Yeah, and, Wyoming, right? So yeah, NC
Wyoming.
State, Wyoming, Appalachian State.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on? Not a bad strategy because linebackers are not as important as some of these other positions, but I just found it really funny.
Yeah, but once you pay them, right? Because you probably talk about how to build a team and stay under the cap. They pay both their linebackers, and I start getting like, oh no, that means you're not gonna. That's a pass rusher off the table. It's a nickel corner. What are you doing?
Yeah, And I was just like, oh my God, they overpaid Trey Hendrickson, which they didn't. But at the time I was like, they overpaid Trey Hendrickson
because they lost Carl Lawson. I mean, they really nailed it. And then they lost William Jackson that same offseason. They lose William Jackson and Carl Lawson.
Yeah.
And they
William Jackson had like the greatest, not his rookie year, but the first year that he played.
2017, the first year he played, absolutely fantastic. He's everything I thought he was going to be. Like when they drafted him, I was like, oh my God, they got a number one corner. And that first year, absolutely
incredible.
Historic. Yeah, if you look at PFS numbers are insane. But they let him go. They let Carl Lawson go. They signed Trey Hendrickson, Mike Hilton, and Chidobe Awuzie with the same money. And it's like, oh, that was so much better.
So it worked out. Yeah. I think the one thing, and they were never going to sign Jesse Bates, and they knew that, which is why they drafted Dax Hill before Jesse Bates hit free agency. I know that, but it just felt like that's the one thing that, man, if they had Jesse Bates, because this is like, the secondary is like pretty good. DJ Turner, I think the first half of the season, DJ Turner was playing lights out. I don't know how he's playing right now, but DJ Turner was playing pretty well. Yeah. Mike Hilton is Mike Hilton, best blitzing slot in the league, and also pretty good at coverage, it turns out, as well. Then Chidobe Awuzie, which, I mean, the Cowboys didn't need him, but it's not because he's bad.
And Woozie is playing because Cam Taylor-Britt went on IR, who was a second-round pick a year ago.
He was playing lights out.
Oh, my God. He was so they've drafted, and then the two safeties, right? Dax Hill and Jordan Battle. They have just drafted all of these guys in the last 2 years and said, "Hey, we know we're going to pay our linebackers. We know we're going to dump all this money on the offensive side. We'll just go as cheap as possible, but with high draft picks at the defensive back room." And I would say we're a year and a half in, and I'm like, yeah, this might actually work.
Yeah, which feels weird, right? Like, I don't know. It's the Bengals have like a long history of drafting defensive backs that like work out regardless of like the draft slot. Well, it goes all the way back to like George Aloka, right?
Yeah, fifth round pick.
Yeah, and so I don't know why, but it just feels weird that would work because they just dumped a bunch of like very performant players, right? And usually that's a sign that a front office is overconfident, and maybe they were, and they just got lucky. I don't know, but I very satisfied with this group. I'm not super familiar with Jordan Battle. Like I know like who he was as a draft prospect from Alabama. I just don't know how he's playing in the NFL right now. I'll defer to you there. Dax Hill to me is playing pretty good. I wouldn't say like Jesse Bates level type stuff, but in terms of like per cost, you're not mad. So yeah, characterize the secondary from what coverages does Anarumo run? What kind of enables this group to do well? What are they weak to? Again, you've got like Justin Jefferson's going to be out there. And Jordan Addison is a speedster, and KJ Osborne, who has played himself out of a contract. I don't know, man. And you've got a group of receivers that the top end's pretty good, the bottom end is whatever, but it's there's a fairly decent amount of threat happening here. Throwing TJ Hawkinson. How do the coverages play out? How does the secondary play? Who has kind of surprised you? Is Jordan Battle any good? I don't know. What's up?
So losing Jesse Bates and Von Bell the same year at safety has been a hit to the defense. And I think it's part of the reason why the linebackers are having issues. They rely more on Mike Hilton in the nickel. And Mike Hilton will play linebacker. Mike Hilton will play safety. So they move them all around just to keep them on the field no matter what. Even if you're going to go out there with only two receivers, the Bengals will find a way to get Mike Hilton on the field to help with communication and just be who he is, right? He's 5'8", 185, but yet he will absolutely kill a screen. There was a play last week where everyone flows to the right, the play action's to the right, they come back, they're throwing a screen to the left, and it's only Mike Hilton out there, 3 blockers and the receiver. And the guy got 0 yards because he absolutely dips under one guy, shakes another, and just pops out and ankle tackles the receiver. And it's like, yeah, that is vintage Mike Hilton. And he's just a fun, good player to watch. You'll be like, oh, this is a slow Antoine Winfield if you're a Vikings fan in the slot there. And it's a lot what he'll look like. On the boundary, it is DJ Turner and Chidobe Awuzie. Awuzie coming off of a knee injury last year, tore his knee ACL on Halloween. That's why they knew they needed to draft a guy anyway. He's in the last year of his deal, but he's finally 1 year plus now from surgery. He's finally starting to show his flashes of what he was. He was actually really good for the Bengals the last 2 years, the first year and a half of that contract. They were very, very happy with him. They used him like a number one corner, and then they draft Cam Taylor-Britt, who was playing very well. He's not going to play this week. He's out with a quad injury. But DJ Turner is kind of skinny and frail and small, short arms. They all have Woozier and Mike Hilton all have like 0 percentile arms. Same with DJ Turner. So like it's kind of weird.
That's just a market inefficiency, man.
They just do not care. Like they're like, yeah, we had no problem with this. But DJ Turner is a 4-2 guy, and he shows it, man. His agility, his footwork, the way he can throttle that speed dial up and down effortlessly. He has been playing very, very well, but he is a young guy, young corner. You can beat him. None of them are playing fantastically. I think I like the flashes of the two young guys, Cam Taylor-Britt and DJ Turner. Like, yeah, they're going to be fine there. But overall, we need to see improvement still. And they need to tackle better on the outside, especially on the boundary. DJ Turner, being a smaller guy, sometimes doesn't get in there. But when he does, it's like, man, you're a speeding bullet. You're Ant-Man. You're flying fast. And even though you're small, you're hitting these guys a lot like Mike Hilton. So I think they're absorbing some of that veteran mindset from him. And Lou Anarumo, so as I'm getting to the safeties and I talk about Bates and Bell being such a loss, they were prepared with Dax Hill, drafting him in the first round. And then they signed Nick Scott, who was a starter for the Rams for the last 2 years. They played against him in the Super Bowl. They thought Nick Scott would be this player that was only ascending. And after starting for 2 years would be better now with the Bengals, would be a good fit. He's been absolutely terrible, horrible even. And like he's been the butt of our jokes on defense. Like, oh, Nick Scott's out there. Here we go. And because now Jordan Battle has replaced him the last few weeks, and Battle has been very, very good. 3rd round pick. The Bengals were going to take him in round 2 if DJ Turner wasn't there. And then they get to round 3 and they're like, Battle's still here, but we don't have to take a safety. Let's trade back a few picks. And if he's still there, we'll take him. We got a 2nd round grade on him. They trade back a few picks, collect a pick for later that they use on a punter. Battle's still there. They take him. They're through the moon. That's why they go defense in the first 3 rounds, because guys that they had graded way higher were still there. He's playing really good. He's not the most athletic guy. He's not the fastest guy. He's a short tackler, a strong tackler, and seems very smart. That was his MO coming out of Alabama as a 4-year starter. You definitely see that with him. They really like the combo of Dax Hill and Jordan Battle, but they're not there yet. The communication thing is most seen and felt when you watch the tape and maybe even look at the data. Under Anarumo with Bates and Bell, they were probably the most versatile defense in the league. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of Bill Belichick with the Patriots during their heyday, where one week, hey, what do we need to be this week? Do we need to be a 3-4 fire zone type defense? Yeah, we'll do it then. Do we need to, because the Bengals do that now. They'll play 3-4, 4-3, 5-2. They'll bear fronts. They'll go quarters coverage. They'll go out there with Mike Hilton as a safety with only one safety on the field. They'll bring Dax Hill down to cover one-on-one on tight ends and man coverage. They'll do that a lot. And actually why I think Dax Hill looks as intriguing to me as an evaluator, because I'm like, oh, you can do so much with him. Yeah, he's not grading high right now because he's getting beat once in a while by these tight ends, these veteran tight ends. But in time, the things you can do with him are not what you can do with every safety. And it's very fun to watch. So I think from a data perspective, they went from being super disguised, super multiple, to we got to vanilla this up just a little bit. We can't disguise things the way we did before. Last year in coverage, they'd be like, all right, we're showing single high and man coverage. And then all of a sudden at the snap, and maybe even almost a second after the snap, a lot of times you'll see defenses, their safeties will start to, they're showing you a little bit just before the snap, maybe a second and a half before the snap. You're like, okay, I can tell they're going to rotate. This is actually going to be a cover 2. With the Bengals, they'd almost wait a half second after the snap. They'd all rotate. It'd be in perfect unison. Everything would look great. They're pointing and then they just, like, Mahomes would just freeze. Like, what just happened? And that's why they were so good against these top quarterbacks. They're almost quarterback proof. Their defense has been since Anarumo's been there. Well, if it's a team that isn't quarterback centric, it's why they've lost to the Browns so much. When they can run the ball, control the clock, do play action, and dictate to you what's going on, they're really susceptible to a bad game script, a negative game script from their perspective, where they can't disguise. They don't get into the 3rd and longs as much. That's when they're going to pull their disguises and try and mix it up and switch things up. If you can keep them from ever getting into that situation where they can do it, they're a very average to poor defense. You look at their stats throughout, it's like, man, this is a bottom 10 defense. What they are is they're really good on 3rd and 5 plus, and they will confuse your quarterback and they will make a play. Otherwise, they give up explosives way too much. They miss tackles way too much, and the coverage just isn't tight enough. So I would say it sounds like it's a bad situation. It is if the Vikings control this game.
All right, well, so I've got some great news for you. So the Vikings are a quarterback-centric offense without a quarterback or a running game.
Oh.
So, so you've got that going for you. So, I mean, Nick Mullins is like not a scrub, right? I mean, he's half of his games, mind you, this is for the Kyle Shanahan San Francisco 49ers, which we just kind of alluded to with Brock Purdy. There's some kind of wizardry there that won't necessarily transfer going to a new team. We just saw that with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And CJ Beathard
we just saw CJ Beathard as well for that Jags game.
Yeah, so former Shanahan quarterbacks populating the league, right? But half of his games he's had average or above average production compared to quarterbacks across the league, which is pretty good for a backup quarterback, obviously. Mm-hmm. But he's still not a starting quarterback. The Vikings have not had a very good running game. I guess the past 3 weeks are a little bit different. They've been a little bit more efficient in the running game. But Alexander Mattison, their lead back, injured. Not a super crazy good back, but he has been playing better the last 3 weeks. And they've got Ty Chandler, who is certainly a lot more explosive and athletic, but they don't seem to trust him in pass protection. His vision doesn't seem to be completely there. And then Kenny Nwangwu is the backup to all of that group. I mean, they've had like 2 other running backs who have also been injured. So Kenny Nwangwu is really like their 5th option. Great kick returner. That's all I'll say. There's not much of a running game. So if they wanted to be run dominant, it would be asking a lot of Ty Chandler, who might turn out to be a good back, but I'm a little skeptical because the Vikings haven't trusted him. And they are a really pass dominant team. They're, in fact, I believe, the most pass dominant team in neutral situations in the NFL.
Wow.
Not confident about that, but I mean, it's difficult because like the Vikings have had so many different quarterbacks. They've been put in so many different situations, but they pass a lot is the point.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, Nick Mullins, right? So with all of that in mind, with, what you know about Nick Mullins, what you know about Shanahan quarterbacks, what you know about Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, I mean, there's like a lot of negatives. There's a ton of positives here. Kevin O'Connell is generally pretty good at scheming guys together. Didn't see that against the Raiders. I mean, obviously the quarterback was a huge issue against the Raiders, but like not very good play calling in my opinion. Which, I mean, if you're limited by your quarterback, like what can you do? But
and then you lose Jefferson right away, which I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which was, I mean, they mentioned that they had a very Jefferson dominant. I mean, who wouldn't, right? But they just said outright, like, yeah, we had a pretty Jefferson dominant game plan going in. So, whoops. So about this offense from that perspective. The pass protection is probably going to be not as good as it was for the rest of the season because they don't have Brian O'Neill, but they do have Christian Darrisaw and so on. So what are your feelings, the way you describe the Bengals defense, what are your feelings going up against this Vikings offense?
They've really done well to focus on defending the run lately and run fits and just being a better tackling team overall the last few weeks. The mindset when the quarterback goes down is either, well, that's it for the season, or guys can rise up and start playing better and maybe carry a little bit on their shoulders, that more than they would have before, because you have a Burrow, you have a special quarterback that can bail you out a little bit and you don't have to be as good. So the last few weeks they've been pretty good, or at least better. And I expect, because they don't really they're going to let Jefferson do his thing. They're going to give some safety help, but there are a lot of single high safety in their defense, and they may shade him a little bit Jefferson's way. But if the Vikings do enough to move him around and do play actions and make it hard enough to really focus on one guy, and they'll move him into the slot, right? So the Bengals will just play their defense and hopefully get you into a situation where you're checking it down and they make a tackle and they get you in a 3rd and 5+, and they're going to try and disguise what they're doing and play with the quarterback. They want to make it a quarterback-centric game. They want to make it Lou Anarumo and what they can do to disguise their looks versus your quarterback. And if you allow them to do it, they will have success. I would be surprised if the Vikings don't understand that and don't at least say, hey, we've got to get under center, run the ball, and run play action. And just, if this could be another, they just come out of a 3-0 game. I mean, like, you get that mindset, right? Like, if this may be 13-10, it may happen. I know the Bengals have scored 34 points the last 2 weeks, but those defenses were bad for the Jags and for the Colts. They didn't disguise enough. They didn't threaten or really, just didn't seem like
the over-under is 40 points.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. It might be a low-scoring game again. And if it is, you just got to grind out a couple of drives and hopefully the ball bounces your way a couple of times. And that's the difference. And I expect that's what the Vikings should do. That's what I think most teams will do. The Bengals are going to play backups 3 out of the final 4 games projected, at least. We'll see if Kenny Pickett gets back for the Steelers, and I might still classify him as a backup.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that really changes the calculation too much.
So they're going to be in dogfights in all of these games remaining, other than that Chiefs game, who we'll see how the Chiefs are doing on offense by the time that game comes. But the Bengals are prepared for it, so I would hope that the Vikings have that same mindset as well.
All right, cool. Well, unless there's like a special, like obviously Evan McPherson's not playing as well as he did his rookie year, but that happens to all phenom rookie kickers, so that doesn't really bother me. But
yeah, he's still good. It's just like he just misses a couple times.
Yeah, but unless there's a special teams note, I already mentioned that Charlie Jones is like very good at punt returning.
Yeah, dangerous. He's been going a lot of horizontal lately, so we'll see if he can get out of it. And then Brand Robbins is a punter rookie. He's absolutely dreadful.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Yeah. I think Brandon Powell is healthy. He's, I'd say above average, but not like special as a punt returner. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, with all of that in mind, give us a score prediction. I believe the Bengals are favored by 3.5. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I can see this. I'm thinking 20-17, 20-14, one score game situation. But I am more worried about this game than I was the Steelers game that the Bengals actually lost, and the last 2 games that the Bengals won. But I thought the Jags were a completely better team of all these teams they faced. It just, the matchup there, I'm like, they could do this. 1:00 games against a opponent that you don't really face off too often. There hasn't been any like trash talk or anything. The Bengals seem to really get up against teams that hate them. They really seem to get up in primetime games, like for that Jags game on Monday night. These 1:00 games, sometimes they just come out flat. And I can just see this being Flores versus Jake Browning not going the way you want it to at all. And I could see this game coming out, 16-10, 13-10 type situation where it's like, yeah, Browning was absolutely swimming in this one. Otherwise, I think roster-wise, the Bengals still, outside of quarterback, have a pretty strong roster. I'm really upset this far now that they're 7-6 and Burrow's not there or not coming back this year, because this AFC is wide open, and I'm like, they could have made a run here. They could have been the best team in this AFC.
Tell me about it, dude.
Right.
Take a look at the Vikings roster, dude.
Yeah, I know. It just sucks that this is happening, right? And for all these teams that have got these backups in there, and you felt like you had a good roster. But having said all that, I do think the Bengals win, but I would not be shocked if this is an absolutely tough game for their quarterback.
All right. Cool, man. Thanks so much for coming on and staying on for as long as you did. What do you have to plug?
Yeah, so at Joe Goodberry on Twitter. I am a Bengals fan. I do mostly talk about the Bengals, but when the offseason comes around, it is very draft-centric, player profiles, data, draft profiles, draft projections. So there you would get probably some fun stuff out of that, even if you're a Vikings fan.
So you don't usually do big boards, man. I know because I keep track. Are you doing a big board this year?
I do always do big boards. I never submit them.
Is it Bengals specific? Is that why I don't include it?
That's why. Yeah. It's
very okay.
Bengals.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, come on, man.
Well, because I've gone and I've looked over. Duke Tobin's been there since 1999, so I've got 20 years of data plus their GM, basically their player personnel director. And I go, okay, they don't draft guys like this. They don't draft guys that have this. So I let the grade get affected by guys that won't pass their filters. So for me, it's a very unique process, and it's very, honestly, and a lot of it, it's been very predictive. I do it with a few guys. We tweak the formula every year, and we're very happy with the way. But we do use your consensus board to balance our rankings and to give us something to work off of. So, you're not using ours, but we are using yours. But other than that, I do a show twice a week on YouTube, Bengals on the Brain. So if you're interested after the Bengals-Vikings play, there will be a lot of Bengals-Vikings plays that I'll diagram and go over. And there'll be some stuff where it's just not Bengals-focused. I will be talking about Vikings players as well.
Yeah, people follow me on Twitter and know that I love to get in fights. Joe loves to get in fights. On Twitter, or I don't know if you love it, but you do get into a lot of fights on Twitter.
I don't know if I love it either after all these years. I just do it. It's been so long, man.
Yeah, it's just, this is who I am. Right. How do I know?
I don't even know who I am anymore. It's been 14 years on this Bird app.
So if you want to follow a dude absolutely broken by the fact that the Bengals were awful and then broken by the fact that the Bengals were great.
Maybe I'm just broken.
You're just broken. Just a broken dude. Follow Joe Goodberry on Twitter. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Draw Play Dave. And he asks, are you nostalgic for the halcyon days of Josh Dobbs being fun?
Yeah, man, that ruled. It was fun to talk about the Pastronaut. Now I feel like we have to cancel him or something. Like I don't like it's a lot like it's like a milkshake duck, really. Like we had all this fun, and then it just gets kind of robbed of us. And anytime we think about how fun it was, we're just like, yeah, but then there's like the Raiders game and the Bears game and the Broncos game, and it's like
the Broncos game after what might have been a concussion.
Right, yeah, which the guy next to us was like, I love that play call, but no, I love it as a coach. Like I'm a high school coach. I love it, but no, you can't do that. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, what if you love, but you can't do it? What does it mean? And he's like, well, I'm a high school football coach. And I was like, say no more. I get it. But yeah, man, it feels tainted. The pure unadulterated joy of the Pastronaut is now just Joshua Dobbs. You can't even.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy like 10 of those jerseys for like $5 when they get discounted down to nothing at the end of the season, and we're just gonna be giving them out as party favors at the next live show.
I like that.
I'm gonna relive the days of Josh Dobbs being awesome. Let's go to the next question, which is from Not Your Father's Dopamine, who asks, does Ivan Pace Jr.'s status as an undrafted free agent hurt or help his defensive rookie of the year chances?
I think it's like there's like an inflection point with this sort of thing. So I think up to a point, your ability to earn a defensive rookie of the year is tamped down by being an undrafted free agent, and it hurts you. But then after a point, if you reach a certain level of, I don't know, like notoriety, or you're playing defense so obviously well enough. And by obviously well, I mean like, if you're playing really well as a nose tackle, you're probably not going to win defensive player of the year or defensive rookie of the year. But if you're like a cornerback and you play well in ways that like you're getting a bunch of pick sixes, like you're Deron Bland or something, then it gets to the point where being an undrafted free agent definitely helps you. And there's just a very small window in between where it doesn't seem to have much of an effect. And then once you kind of get past that, and it's a very easy one to get past, it helps you because it's part of the story. Because a lot of the Rookie of the Year awards, a lot of them get helped by a story, or they're a fun story to tell, or they're just a fun player to watch, which Ivan Pace is. That said, I don't think Ivan Pace is anywhere close to that sort of thing. I mean, he didn't play a bunch of games at the beginning of the season. He didn't play a bunch of snaps. So if he had played all year, sure. Also, it is kind of interesting. I wonder if actually the thing that would hurt him more is the fact I think it's 3 different defensive players for the Vikings have won Defensive Player of the Week. I think at some point, if one were to seriously make the argument, other people would respond with, well, it seems like everybody succeeds in that defense, which is unfair, but would be part of the argument.
Ziggy Dilf asks, been a lot of talk asking if the Vikings can maintain this level on D, even if they lose Flores, but I wonder if can they keep it up to, if they can even keep it up to like retain him. How much of the scheme will be figured out by the next time offensive coordinators face us, a la the 1977 Falcons, versus how much is sustainable year over year?
I really like that reference to the 77 Falcons, because that's like the grid splits. The 77 Falcons, if I remember correctly, allowed the fewest amount of points in NFL history. They're not remembered as one of the greatest defenses of all time because they didn't have postseason success. And also it was like pretty short-lived. Like the 86 Bears were also a very good defense. In fact, statistically, they were better than the 85 Bears. The late 60s to early 70s or even mid 70s Vikings, really dominant defense. The Doomsday defense with the Cowboys, Orange Crush with the Broncos, the Legion of Boom. There's not a ton of individual season defenses. I guess maybe the 2000 Ravens, not that they were like bad outside of it, where that happens. The 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers did have good years outside of 2002 on defense. And the 77, they just dropped off. And the grid splits was they just sent the house. It was like you picked a punt block in Madden and you're like, I'm going to live with that, which if anyone's ever done that, it's extremely fun. even when you get burned for like a 40-yard touchdown because they just threw a screen and you're not actually covering anybody, but it is outrageously fun to do. There was a defense that did that. That defense, I like, with all respect to the 77 Falcons, was insanely easy to figure out, right? It was just like, oh, we'll just throw a screen. It's fine. This one is a little bit more difficult, I would say. I would argue. I would think that this is a tougher one to figure out, but that's not to say that it won't get figured out in some ways. Every defense in the NFL has gotten figured out. It doesn't mean the defense will go away. We talked about it on the football party today, actually. But the characteristics of the defense might stay the same, but the nature, it's going to get figured out. That said, you want somebody as adaptable and flexible as Flores as your defensive coordinator. So if he gets hired as a head coach, and I think his odds just shot up pretty dramatically today. Hey, that's the Raiders offense. It could do that. Okay, I guess Flores knows what he's doing. If that happens, I don't think you'll have somebody else running the same defense unless it's an internal promotion and that guy is very smart and understands kind of everything that needed to be done on that defense, which I don't know, maybe it only took Flores a couple of months to learn this defense, it sounds like. But yeah, I think that they would probably run a different variant. Either way, I think the defense would be good next year. It just will be different again. I think, for example, like the blitz rate would go down and they'd throw in some other stuff. But it's going to get figured out. It kind of sucks because I was thinking about this earlier. What kind of sucks about this is that like this has an opportunity to be one of the best defenses of all time. Were it not for the first couple of weeks while they were figuring the defense out and fine tuning everything, because then we'd be able to put it up against the recent good defenses, like include like the 2019 Patriots, who are just like insanely good. Or the historically recent good defenses like the 15 Broncos and I guess the 15 Panthers, as well as like the 13 Seahawks. It would be really fun to have that conversation, but the first couple of weeks have just made it really difficult to put it up there, right? Because like right now, this defense might be as good as, if not better than, the 2017 Vikings defense, but we're not going to have that conversation because at the end of the year, they'll have allowed more points because of what happened at the beginning of the season. So that kind of sucks. But yeah, defenses get figured out. That happens. But there is a possibility the defense gets better because they'll bring in more talent. So I don't know. But Flores leaving, obviously, like that would be significant, and seems like that's now on the table, even though I've suggested for a while that it probably wouldn't be.
Let's go to Cody, who asks, for a Reef's quarterback emotional attachment scale corner. On a scale from Russell Wilson, a Reef's favorite quarterback, being traded from the Seahawks, a Reef's favorite team, to Carson Wentz being bad at football, where does the heartbreaking news of the Vikings downgrading Dobbs to quarterback 3 rank?
So I think this question only happens because Luke tweeted out that I was like extremely mad that he was the third string quarterback. And Luke tweeted that out because on the football party today, Sam was like, who's going to be the backup quarterback? And Luke said Jaron Hall. And I was like, I don't know, man. Joshua Dobbs, if it's not him, I'm not going to be mad, which of course invites the idea that I am. But yeah, and this is fine. I'm fine. It's whatever the middle of that is. The news that Christian Ponder would be benched. No, actually, I was pretty excited about Joe Webb, so I can't compare that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nope, can't do that. There have not been a lot of non-dramatic quarterback changes with the Vikings. That one's tough. I'm trying to think. Probably like initially hearing that Gus Frerotte was going to replace T-Jack, turned out that was a great idea. But like initially, it was just like, yeah, whatever, I guess.
That's I feel like I feel like it's much more. If we're gonna go back to Seattle for a moment, I feel like it's the decision to finally start Geno Smith instead. There's excitement involved, right?
True
right.
Luck. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's go to Beef Brewski, who asks, what's your opinion on benching quarterbacks, especially younger ones? In particular, are there quarterbacks that would have developed had coaches been willing to be patient? Is there any evidence to support a ride or die approach?
I mean, the premise of this question, does that assume that Joshua Dobbs is a young quarterback? Like, I don't know how to. I can answer this like in the abstract, but like Dobbs is not a young quarterback, so I'm not. That doesn't really matter too much. But maybe there's something to be said about like, hey, one reason that you don't want to put Jaron Hall out there is because if he plays poorly and you bench him, you kind of disrupt his confidence or his development. Something that we saw with, I think Tua was benched by Brian Flores, which the thing is, like, the thing about Brian Flores as a head coach is like it's a pretty poisonous reputation because of what happened in Miami. Not even talking about the lawsuit or owners. It's just like a lot of fans and a lot of journalists just don't think he's a very good head coach because he wasn't in Miami. And a lot of people blame him for ruining Tua's confidence. And fair, I guess, because the stories that have come out of that have been not like the stories about Brian Flores, but just the stories about like Tua and what he's been feeling have been absolutely like devastating. Like this dude like lost confidence to the nth degree, right? It was like, am I even good anymore? And like the whole thing with Mike McDaniel was that he put together a cut up of 700 good plays that Tua put together and gave it to Tua to restore his confidence. Like, which is just like that's how broken this dude was, right? Maybe that's a peculiarity about Tua. We know his upbringing was like pretty messed up. I don't want to like get too into it because he doesn't seem to be that upset about it. But the description of it is like not wonderful. But like it sounded like, for example, his father was about as harsh as you can be after like games where he would be like winning and stuff like that. So I don't know, maybe that's a peculiarity, but he does instill a lot of confidence in this defense. So maybe he changed, maybe Mike Tomlin changed him. Either way, the confidence angle is not that important to me. It feels like most young quarterbacks who are benched are probably just not going to be good. And the ones that would have been good otherwise, obviously you can't test a counterfactual, but we do have evidence that like someone like Tua can turn out to be an MVP candidate despite that. And the bigger problem is not that you benched him. The bigger problem is that you have a coaching environment that doesn't maximize him just kind of generally, which is one reason that you benched him. But the problem wasn't benching. That was a symptom. So yeah, there's probably something there, but I think that for the most part, that doesn't really happen too much where a young quarterback starts and then gets benched and now they're just kind of broken forever. I would need like some pretty good examples of that because for the most part, they're quarterbacks where I am not confident that they would have ever succeeded in another environment. Maybe, I don't know if Sam Darnold was benched, but actually Darnold would be like an interesting example. Maybe Geno is an interesting example, but I think that was like he couldn't possibly have ever succeeded in the Jets environment anyway, so maybe not. But like same with Darnold, I guess. But like Darnold played really well with the Panthers, and the few moments that we've seen with the 49ers have looked like all right. So maybe, but I would need some more like evidence that this is something that we could suggest this.
Let's go to Don from Ohio first before we end the show. Don from Ohio asks, how does it feel knowing I made the Hell League playoffs with the worst point total in the league by close to 300 points?
Bad. It feels worse now.
Quite. Before the article was posted, Luke had posted something to the Discord because Luke is in the Hell League, the one that's been previewed over on Wide Left, and he had pointed out something that was just astonishing and awful and wonderful all at the same time. It said 3 of the top 6 point getting teams missed the playoffs this year.
So it is more liable for that to happen in this league for what are probably, like when you think about it, fairly obvious reasons, but you don't like, it doesn't immediately register, which is like once you score enough points to win, all of the extra points kind of don't matter. And that just happens all the time in this league, right? It's like, it's almost all blowouts. Like I was in a game where I lost by like 0.2 points, and it was just shocking that was even possible in this league.
Yeah, when it does happen, it's just remarkable. You just sit there and go, I don't know how to react to this.
Yeah, it's much rarer than like Justin Tucker missing an extra point.
Yeah.
It turns out.
Just just totally messes with you. Finally, from Jordan asks, for our Reef's economy corner, can you think of a more hilarious way to demonstrate inflation than by quoting the price of door-dashing lobster tails from Outback Steakhouse?
This is incredible. So for people like unaware, which I don't know how it feels like our listeners are like super tuned into online discourse, which that's a problem for them to solve. But in leftish circles, not even like leftist, but like leftish circles, there's been like a growing debate about whether or not the economy is bad. It's awesome because no one knows how to talk about it, including me. Like I'm not saying that I know when they're being dumb. What I mean is no one knows. And so like there are all these economic indicators indicating that the economy is like very good and that real wages in the aggregate have risen relative to inflation, even once you account for inflation, but people responding to 2019 prices because prices have gone up. This is a whole thing. Right. And like people have been subdividing the data. They've been talking about the lower quartile. They've been talking about the fact that the term vibe session is like a thing. Like people just accept. No one even like now people don't even use it as a joke. Now people are just like, this is a vibe session. And they like 100% serious. It's like you have a PhD. Like, please. But like all of the polls indicate that people think that the economy is going the wrong way. And what's even more baffling is that for one of the first times, at least that I know of, in the polls, when people are asked, are you personally doing better than you did 3 years ago? Like 70% of people or something. So a lot of people are saying yes. And then when they're asked if the economy is headed in the right direction, they say no. And that's fine. You can like look outside of yourself. But historically, those two answers correlate with each other pretty strongly. And so everyone's like, what is going on? So one of the things that people are talking about is inflation. And so a lot of people, especially if you hate Biden, you'll post like, I went to the grocery store and like my groceries cost a bunch of money. And now it's gotten to the point where like people kind of don't believe you because sometimes people take pictures of what they bought and the receipts in the picture. And you can tell that actually they also bought like caviar and they just hid that from view or something. It's so weird. Anyway, so people have been posting prices for stuff, right? And there's this whole argument. Nate Silver got involved, which like feels like the first time in like a couple years that Nate Silver has been right about something. I don't know if he is, but it feels like it, and that is uncomfortable. But the people, some people are quote tweeting him with like, "Hey, you're crazy." People say they feel much worse about the economy than they have felt about objectively far worse economic situations in the past. Consumer sentiment was lower, etc. Nerd stuff, right? And then the guy quote tweets. It's just a random guy. Quote tweet with, I've been saying this over and over again. This is why inflation is so destructive to presidencies. With unemployment, overwhelming number of people are still employed. Lots of unemployed expect to get hired back, etc. Inflation is different. People at all income levels notice it, whether it's the $10 Happy Meal or the $150 Outback delivery. And someone responded with, hey, how much Outback are you ordering? And by someone, I mean Andy Kaczynski at CNN. Like K-File, that guy. And he's like, well, I have 2 teenage boys. I order 2 Bloomin' Onions, a steak salad, lobster tails, a filet, a chicken sandwich, and a sirloin. That plus tip and tax is $125 in DoorDash right now. Which, first of all, if you ordered all of that at like a restaurant and it came out to $125, that sounds normal to me. I don't know, man. Second, why are you ordering Outback from DoorDash?
Why are you ordering lobster Outback DoorDash?
A lot of people have asked versions of these questions that we've been wondering, James, and wonderfully, this person has responded. So one guy, actually a Jeopardy champion who lives in Minneapolis, and we follow each other. Sam says, ordering Outback Steakhouse on DoorDash is a wild move. Correct, Sam. You are correct. And the guy goes, why? It's the same cost as eating in the restaurant, and I don't have to traumatize my autistic 16-year-old by forcing him to sit through a meal in a noisy restaurant. Okay, I don't want to like contest that, but like there's a lot of other points that you can bring up, which Sam does. One, there's always an upcharge even with free delivery. That's true. Two, the whole point of a place like Outback is the kitschy vibe. The food is overpriced for what you're getting. Also true, you're paying an Australian tax. from a group of people that are in no way Australian. It's wonderful. 3, it won't travel well. That blooming onion is going to be, Bloomin. Sorry, I didn't mean to pronounce the G. That's not there. The bloomin' onion is going to be soggy. Wonderful point. Didn't even mention the lobster tails. But James, you're also right about the lobster tails. And the guy responds, the whole point of a place like Outback is that it's reasonably priced steak for families that can't shell out for a Jeff Ruby's or a Hyde Park. I get that. But as I said, we have other reasons for not traveling there. And it's like, okay, look, it is cheaper than Ruth's Chris, right? Like, fine. But there are other more reasonably priced steak options that aren't intentionally overpriced. Whatever. I looked at the Outback menu because he gave the order, right? And I was like, oh, I've got the data. I can look at this. And nothing here seems unreasonably priced to me. So Bloomin' Onions, they're $11 each. That obviously is unreasonably priced, but also if I went to Outback Steakhouse and I saw that on the menu, like, duh, that's their signature item. Like, it's always been overpriced. Also, it's like really annoying to make, so fine, right? That's the only thing that seems overpriced, and that's what you're buying into that when you do Outback. Like, if you go to Outback and you don't at least once get the Bloomin' Onion, I like am very curious about your like motivations, right? So he gets 2 of those that are $11 each. Then he gets a steak salad. I couldn't find it on the Outback menu for the Bloomington Outback. I'm just going to price it the same as a regular salad, $5.99. It's probably more than that. Then lobster tail, 2 of them for $14.79. I think that's actually cheap. Like, fine. That's a fine price, right? So, and he said lobster tails. I don't know how many. I just put 2 down. Then he said a filet. I assume he meant a filet mignon, right? Those are the expensive steak. Like, I can't think of a steak that is like the least price to performance cut out of all the major cuts of steak. Like, that is supposed to be expensive. And I didn't put in the 8 ounce. I gave him the 6 ounce. So it's $28. Now, that is too expensive for an Outback steak, but that is a filet. And remind you, he also got a sirloin. And the sirloin was $20.79 for an 8 ounce sirloin. And again, a little pricey, but also not something that I would see as unreasonable at an Outback. Like, if I saw a $20 sirloin at Applebee's, I'd be like, I wasn't paying this 5 years ago, but also I'm ordering a sirloin steak at Applebee's, $20, fine. And then the chicken sandwich is $14.99. Sandwiches at these like Chili's type, TGIF type establishments are always a little bit overpriced. Maybe that one is slightly overpriced too. I put it all together. That comes out to $95.54. You add in the tip and the tax, yeah, it's $125. This does not seem like good evidence of inflation. There's a ton of good evidence out there. This does not seem like that. But yeah, I was ensorcelled by this thread because why a delivery Bloomin' Onion?
That's gonna be soggy as hell.
Yeah, I could go on DoorDash right now. I should have probably just done that, but the whole thing was to compare DoorDash to the menu prices.
Yeah.
I could go to DoorDash right now and find better food for cheaper that includes steak and have that delivered. This is crazy to me. I love the internet.
I was about to say, in the past couple of weeks, not only did we get a insomnia cookie opening here in town, but we also got a crumble as well. So we
talk about expensive cookies. The crumble cookies are pricey.
Yeah, they are absolutely that. They are. One could refer to them as bougie and not be wrong.
I think that was like one of my original defenses. Like, hey, the crumble cookie is way more expensive than insomnia.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. And we'll be back next week to discuss, hopefully, the victory over the Bengals. Be back on Monday night, Tuesday morning. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Yes, we got a couple of pieces over at the Wide Left Substack. Obviously, the recap of the Raiders game, a discussion about... I've got a preview of a discussion I did over his own coverage there, too, about why you would go with Nick Mullins over Joshua Dobbs, despite the fact that I actually do think that Joshua Dobbs played a lot better than his critics say. I agree with Kurt Warner that actually Dobbs wasn't great. He was fine, and Nick Mullins was not demonstrably better. It's just the results were better. I still think you should go with Nick Mullins. That piece is up. Luke Braun broke down this question about drops because PFF says there were 6 drops all while Josh Dobbs was playing in that game. And that really brings up the question of what is a drop, because Luke counted 7. Another SIS counted 8. And Pro Football Reference, which uses Sport Radar for its advanced statistics, counted 2. And so Luke went through basically every time a ball hit a receiver's hands and wasn't complete, and went through kind of our understanding of what a drop is. I think it's despite the fact that I don't like Luke or respect his work, I think it's a pretty good piece. So that's up there. James's piece on the Hell League is up there previewing the playoffs. That's pretty fun because it's got a little story about the Hell League MVP. James didn't actually use that. I just put that in the title.
MVP of the week this week, of last week, yeah.
I think he's kicker 1, isn't he?
He's kicker 5, actually.
Okay, well, he's got a huge playoff percentage or something like that. So yeah. I'm gonna count it. Remember, James did not use the word MVP for the season the phrase in the article. I just threw it up, and James just has to be comfortable with that. But we got all those pieces over at Wide Left. Obviously, Minnesota Football Party, that kind of stuff. So find me on Twitter at @ArifasonNFL.
This is what I get for not editing my own articles. This is it for this episode of Norse Code. We'll be back next week. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that maybe you should put that in a garage next time. And
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN, or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.